And the prize for the longest time between video essays goes to... Hi. If this is your first time seeing my face, my name is Logan-Ashley, and I have spent roughly the last 3 years writing about transgender horror and what that phrase means specifically in the context of film. Now, my interest in trans horror is mostly in its social and historical context, and I made a point in my original video essay, which you can watch below if you have not watched that already, to state in there that I try to avoid looking at these films as good or bad. That being said, I'm not immune to best and worst of video essays, and one thing that I enjoy doing is going on Letterboxd and sorting the list from like community rated best to worst. And what the people have to say is fascinating. So I have it on a little card here, and I know it's because that I'm probably the only person in the world who has seen all of these very specific films, but it's also just really funny to see what is considered the best and worst as dictated by people who do not care about this as much as I do. So, according to the general public, these are the 5 worst trans horror films based on average viewer rating. So we have Laxmi, They Slash Them, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, Train of the Dead, and The Deep Ones. And the 5 best are Sounds of the Lambs, Psycho, Alien, Coming Out, and a tie between Santa Sangre and Rocky Horror. So, obviously my opinions are not the only correct ones, even though they totally are. And I also made a broad promise that once I finally had seen 150 films for this, I would finally make a ranking video because why not? So, quick point of clarification. These are ranked best to worst in terms of my personal enjoyment, not in terms of like good or bad depictions. So this is like fully subjective. This is just mostly my thoughts, not as a historian, but like as a person who likes to watch horror films. I will try not to go into spoilers, but I make no promises. Watch ahead at your own risk. Second point of clarification. I am waiting to do a full, like, comprehensive rewatch. So there are some films on this list that I have seen like 4 or 5 times. There are some films that I've only seen once. The middle chunk of this list is like super fluid. I probably won't talk a whole lot about those films, whereas the more extreme ends of the spectrum I can probably go into a little more detail about. And because we don't want to just like blow our metaphorical load too early, here's how we're gonna do this. I have a bottom 75 and I have a top 75 over here. We're gonna do the bad list first because I know that's what all of you care about most, and then we're gonna finish it off with the good stuff. And real quick before we get into it, if this is something that you are a fan of and it's something you want to continue to support, I do have a Patreon that I launched back in October. You might be watching this video essay there early now. So what I do over there is twice a month I watch 2 films. One film I take from this unconfirmed trans horror canon list, and watch the film basically to assess whether or not the film does count to the canon, why it doesn't, and I recommend it from there. From the second, I take from a list of horror films that have been directed by, written by, or feature prominently in some way a trans person. Every once in a while these 2 lists overlap, but for the most part they're just kind of 2 different ways of looking at trans horror. If you go there now, you can find reviews for films like The Snowman, Hellraiser 2022, Paper Girl, 5 Fingers of a Dog, Die Card, and a full overview of the Queer for Fear special that came out on Shudder about a year ago. That link will be in the description below, and I appreciate all the patrons that I do have so far. You guys make this possible. And now we are going to get into the worst list.
It's time to tell them apart today. Hey, hey, girls were girls and boys were boys when I was a tot. Now we don't know who is who or even what's what.
So at number 76, we have Innocent Boy. This one is right on the edge of like the good and bad divide. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. It's fine. It's mostly like a vibes thing, and I'm not much of like a vibes movie kind of person, so I don't really like giallos. But for what it is, and for like being one of the few films to actually feature a trans person of color, it's fine. I don't want to dog on it too hard. It's just like not my thing. Number 77 is The Serpent's Nest. I promise this is the only Alice McKay film on the bottom list. It's totally serviceable for a short film made by a teenager. Just looking at like the rest of Alice's canon, it's the weakest of the films that I have seen from her. 78, Goodbye Gemini. This, oh god, I think I watched this like on a really shitty YouTube rip because Any existing DVD copies are like super expensive, which is fine. It's great. I love it. Yeah, fine, weird little just like incest thriller that like throws trans people in there in the middle for like no reason at all. It's not really offensive. It's just kind of like obscenely British. 79, Lake Forest Road. I watched this at like Salem Horror Fest, I think the same session that I watched Meta. And it's like fine. It's like a pretty standard, like, I think it's like 5 minutes long, just like an alien abduction horror film. It is totally fine, and I feel like it's only on here because one of the actors is a trans guy. And at this point, when I initially was making the list, I did not have a whole lot of like trans masculine films to go off of, so I was really, really lenient in what I was leading in and what I was letting in. Yeah, it's fine. I don't think it has surfaced much outside of film festivals. I could be totally wrong. I haven't gone looking for it since then. Totally fine film. Number 80, Miss Leslie's Dolls. This film is weird. Again, this is one that I've watched one time. My memory of it is like kind of hazy and mostly stems from when I was editing clips for the previous essay. Interesting in the sense that it is like, I think pretty clearly like trying to be an exploitation film, but it's just kind of like mostly boring and like weird softcore predatory lesbians. And then all in the last 20 minutes is where all the trans stuff comes in. It's fine. It's more so interesting as like a case study in like film preservation and how like this was previously thought to be lost. We didn't like find out about it again until like the 2010s. In that sense, it's kind of interesting, but like the film itself is mostly like kind of boring. 81, God Told Me To. Again, another one I have seen only once. I feel like I would like it better on a second viewing. I also have just like not been a super fan of all of the Larry Cohen films I've seen to this point. It's fine, kind of confusing and boring. Yeah, I got nothing else to say about it. Totally fine, has not really stuck much in my memory besides like a vague memory of stomach vagina, like pre-Cronenberg. 82, Inmate Zero. Okay, so point of clarification for this one. I don't think I've seen this full film. So what happens a lot in my house is a horror film will be on and I will either stumble into it or be called down into it to assess whether or not a character is trans. And that's what happened with this. And it was one of those films where like I watched a majority of it and like tried to catch all of this character scenes. And I genuinely can't tell if they're trying to do like an evil cross-dressing guy thing or if they're trying to do some kind of trans character thing. I fully intend to rewatch this eventually, and this film may or may not like end up getting taken off of the trans horror canon upon further viewing. Don't know. From what I saw, it was like a vaguely interesting concept, vaguely like well shot. I just have like very little memory of it. 83, Night of the Living Babes. Definitely the weirdest softcore film probably to end up on this list. Pretty much just like sissification porn, but helmed by a character who we are to understand as like a trans guy. It's really, really weird, and I wish it leaned more into like that stuff, because for a majority of the film you're just like watching the two nagging girlfriends yell at each other, or you're watching the two idiot boyfriends yell at each other, and it's like there is so much more of like an interesting plot with the sissification trans guy and him trying to turn all these guys into like women. It's weird. I kind of recommend it, but it's not like good. 84, Insidious Chapter 2. Yeah, I know that I saw this movie in the theaters with my friend, and I recall pretty much nothing about it except for like what I've had to edit for the video essay about the trans killer. I'm sure it's fine. The first one's fine. The second one's fine. I have literally no recollection of any of the ones after that. 85, The New Nanny. So this is one of the ones from like the Halloween, like bite-sized Halloween specials. This one's like technically fine, but for like a concept where it's like a witch helps a non-binary kid like overcome bullies, it's like weirdly tonally inconsistent and just like doesn't engage enough with the material, and it's just like goes too fast for what I think it could or should have been. 86, The Skin I Live In. I feel bad that I don't like this film, especially because like there's another film lower on this list that is adapted from the same book that is much worse. I think this is the only film of this director's that I've seen, and I know that he's supposed to be good, and I know that this is also not his only film with trans women, so I'm sure there's like a thing going there. For what it is, it's fine. It's like, it's artsy. I don't know. I have like no particular thoughts about it either way. 87, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4. So I know I'm gonna get crucified for this. The first Texas Chainsaw is like the only one that I like. I don't like 2. I haven't seen 3. I've seen like a bunch of the remakes and they're all awful. I think 4 was probably at least like interesting in its badness. I don't know. Like there's something about just like the cast and the tone it takes. By the end, it's like a total shit show, and like I kind of understand why so many people hate it, but at the same time, like I don't think Texas Chainsaw is like a series with a whole lot of like prestige to it inherently. Like it's not a good franchise. 88, Terror Train. I mean, for like the 1980 Jamie Lee Curtis films that came out this year, it's fine. This is just like another slasher that I found myself mostly bored during. And the kills are fine. It's just like, it has not had a lasting impact on my memory because all I remember is David Copperfield, Jamie Lee Curtis, and a character who vaguely looks like Sam Raimi. 89, Fatal Games. Another one that only survives on YouTube through VHS rips. I love it. This is one that I also remember like virtually nothing about, despite the fact that I've seen it like at least more than once. That though might actually be because of like the film quality, because it's like a really shitty VHS transfer. And also it's just like kind of mid-late 80s, like we're starting to hit the slasher drop. It's fine. I mean, like what has lingered with me most, like more than anything, is like the slow cut to like the newspaper that our killer just like keeps in her office as, I guess, a daily reminder of the fact that she has like too much testosterone in her system, which is like a super funny visual, but like the rest of the film just like does not keep up at that pace. Number 90, Maléfique. I want to say this was like super slow, but like still captivating. I just don't know how much that like captivation is going to keep through like repeated viewings. I kind of enjoyed it. It just kind of like, the longer it goes, the less into it you are. There's a really bad and really irritating like disabled stereotype in there. The trans character's like a little more forgiving, even though like they fucking bumbled that at the end too. And then the end is just kind of like a sad bummer pile of oh. 91, Brain Death. I feel bad that this is so low. Like clearly there's like a lot of interesting ideas on display here. I think in like my Letterboxd review, I'm like, this literally feels so dense with ideas that I don't know how to come at this. But it's, I think because of how dense it feels and how occasionally scattered it feels, there's just like nothing for me to cling on to. There's like occasional gasps of plot, but there's mostly just like a lot of sounds, a lot of visuals, a lot of things that like don't connect and that I can't follow. And also the film is probably not going to be available to like watch to the wider public anytime soon, which is like frustrating, but like I don't know what kind of audience this film would have. I mean, if you come across it, I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's just very, very specifically like for an online niche crowd. 92, I Hate My Body. So the only version of this I've watched has like the first 5 minutes cut off. So it pretty much starts like exactly where like our main character is like exploded into a female body. Mostly it fails in the sense that like you come into it expecting like this transploitation, like body-mind disconnect. And there's some of that, but for the most part it's just like, oh, being a woman sucks because my credentials aren't valid in the workforce. And now I have to work on like the factory line. Which is like, yeah, that sucks and is real life, but is also like not what I signed up for when your first 20 minutes has like a Nazi scientist putting man brain into woman body. So interesting idea, failed execution, tangentially interesting final product. Number 93, Sukiban Boy. Definitely still the only film for this canon I've watched on a porn site. It's fine. My memory of it is that I watched it before I watched Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and my thought was, well, surely Beyond the Valley of the Dolls can't be any crazier than Sukiban Boy. It's not good enough for how hard it is to find. Again, I had to watch this on a porn site without captions. I had the subtitles going in a separate tab, like reading along and having to like manually scroll. So my viewing experience of it like wasn't the best. So if I can find like an actual DVD copy or just like a properly subtitled copy, I think it might be worth like a reevaluation. But for right now, it's just kind of like, okay, I've had worse ways to see partial female nudity. Number 94, id. Another issue where I don't have proper subtitles and I have to like manually scroll in a separate tab, which is not good viewing experience. For what it is a very good, grimy, dirty, like Japanese equivalent to like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type, where it's just like everything is gross and just like sweaty and you feel the film. Just kind of like not my style. The issue with the captionings really hindered my like ability to understand it. Number 95, 4 Flies on Gray Velvet. So I think this is like the highest rated giallo I have on this list. I want to like giallos more than I do because I feel like I'm the only person who like actively does not like them. This one's fine. I mostly have like a memory of, again, the ending, and like I'm pretty sure there's like 1 or 2 gay cops in there somewhere. And that was kind of interesting. But for the most part, like, especially this kind of like Argento giallo where like the plot jumps around between all these different characters who like may or may not have anything to do with each other, it's just like super not my style. At 96, they/them. I have come to realize that my enjoyment of this film is either A, Stockholm Syndrome, because I've seen it like 4 times, or B, entirely reliant on the ability to watch it with a person who has not seen it yet. Because I watched this like day 1, the premiere day, and I fucking hated it. And I wrote a whole review where I'm like, this is terrible. And then I watched it with my family, and then I watched it for a 3rd time with some friends. And both of those 2 times, like once I knew what I was like in for, I had like a fucking blast. Because like the more I watch this film, the more I am like convinced that it's like somehow a psyop. Because I'm like, there's no way that you were like Oscar nominated twice and you think that this is like a story structure or characters or just like how a film works. I would not recommend like watching it by yourself because I don't know how much enjoyment you get out of it. But if you want to get together like a room of like your queer friends and just like make fun of the Pink fucking perfect musical number, such a hard recommend, holy shit. 97, Murder. This film honestly just kind of like bores me. The sound design is not good, and that is mostly just like a product of it being like one of the earlier sound films. It's not great Hitchcock, it's not a great film, it's just like it perfectly deserves a 3.0 average rating. It's fine. Number 98, the Carmilla movie. I apparently like missed when Carmilla was a thing. If the internet tells me correctly, this was like an internet Tumblr show that was on in like the middle of the 2010s, and then they got a movie a few years after it finished. I completely missed that. I am not a viewer of the show. I know next to nothing about it. So in that sense, the film's many flashback sequences and like expository dumps, super helpful for me. Probably really irritating for a fan of the show. But for what it is, the film is like fine. It's not really scary. Because of my lack of history with the show, I had like no investment in anything that was going on because the film, I think, kind of rightfully presupposes that you have to have an interest in the show if you're watching the movie. I did not, so I didn't get a whole lot out of it, but like, it's fine if you have a history with the show, if you're curious where these characters end up in the end, like, there's worse films to watch. 99, Haunting Me. So this film is mostly like on the canon because I find it fascinating to talk about like specifically the South Asian relationship with transness and how that manifests itself in film. I don't think I finished Haunting Me because it was one of those where like I kind of figured out early on that I'm like, okay, I know what kind of comedy this is. The comedy's not landing for me. I'm going to skip through and yep, nothing changed. The credits are rolling. I got it. I think there's like 10 more of these films. I'm not interested in watching the rest of them. Yeah, if you're into like, I think it's Thailand. If you're into like Thai comedies, I guess, check it out. This is clearly like the start of a major franchise for some reason. At 100, Lawang Garden. So this is a hard film for me to like even have on this list because the only copy of it that I could find was on YouTube without subtitles, and I cannot find subtitles for the film, period. So if you speak I think it's tag along. Like, I guess this is like my general call. If you're interested in subtitling a 2013 film from Thailand about, I think it's transgender murders, hit me up. I will pay you to like subtitle this. I attempted to watch it without the subtitles, and I got a very similar vibe to Haunting Me, where it's like a comedy about this like super dark material. I called this one worse than Haunting Me, I think entirely because I did not have subtitles to even like vaguely understand what was happening. But that may or may not change once I find out what the film is actually about. 101, American Nightmare, the American giallo that was filmed in Canada. This one, again, fine. The copy that I watched was super, super shitty. I have not revisited it since, like, before the original video essay. I think Michael Ironside's in that film, isn't he? I don't know why Michael Ironside is here. For that reason, this film is fascinating. Besides that, completely forgettable. I have nothing to say about it. 102, Eye of the Labyrinth. Yeah, another giallo with all the same problems that I usually have with giallos. Fucking Italians. 103, Follow That Skirt, aka Thrill Killer. So this one is interesting in the sense that like it came out in the 60s and there is just like by and large much less material for the 60s than there is for like any other subsequent decade. And it's pretty much just like softcore porn with the occasional trans murderer. And then it's done in like 20 minutes. I can't think of any reason anybody would watch it outside of like my trans horror specific context. 104, Night After Night After Night. I think this is our last giallo. I could be wrong. Least convincing mystery and like the least cohesive giallos are the ones I've seen before. Because the other two, I think you can at least make the argument of like, okay, there is a vision, there is a solid script, there is like something behind these films. Night After Night After Night, literally, I think had the director abandon the film at one point, so it's like, there's some like interesting visual moments. Like I think on Twitter I posted about the clip where he's like looking at all the boobs around him and the camera's just like zooming in and out like it's a Sam Raimi film. And that's really fun, but like besides that like sporadic moments of zaniness, it's like, it's not a very memorable film. 105, Bathroom Troll. This one is mostly just wasted concept. I think especially right now with like the resurgence of bathroom bills and the resurgence of like the fucking everything, there's like a lot you can do with like the horror of a public bathroom. This director did not do that. Instead, he was like, hey, what if trans bathroom panic, but affecting cis girls? Which is like, yeah, that also sucks, but it's like clearly there's, it was right there, man. It was fucking right there. I think he was planning on making it a feature film. Clearly, it's been 5 years. I'm not sure if that's still in the works or not. I'm not mad that it's not from the look of it. I think if you want to tell the story, it has to be a little more trans-focused than just like, oh, a cis girl has been confused for trans. Like, I'm not interested in that story, man. 106, Scary Movie. I had such, okay, maybe it's because like I was not allowed to watch this film as a kid and I had to watch it like secretly at my best friend's house at a sleepover. But like I held this movie to such high esteem as a kid. And then I watched like one or the two of the sequels. I think Scary Movie 3 still holds up. Rewatching this recently, I was like floored at how not funny it was. Like, I don't know, like, was it just like a product of its time or was it just like ever funny? No rewatch value, mostly just homophobia. Not worth revisiting. 107, Ghost Watch. Maybe it's the Britishness of it. Maybe it's the found footage thing, which I'm also not generally a fan of. Maybe it's just like the knowing where it's going and being kind of bored of it, so I didn't have like the immersion effect that everybody else seemed to have. I just did not get the hype of this movie. Like, I'm sure like if I was like 8 and watching this in whatever 90s Britain on my TV, not knowing that it was fake and then like having that reveal happen, I'm sure it would have been like a lot more interesting. But like watching it as an adult in my bedroom on my laptop as like an American person, it didn't do anything for me, and my immersion was like not there. 108, Strip to Kill. Pretty much just like a compilation of like increasingly bizarre strip scenes with an ending and characters that like aren't really not sufficiently motivated, but like convincingly motivated, or just like it's a weird film. I don't know what else I can say about it besides that. 109, In Dreams. Definitely the funniest I've ever seen apples be in a film. Oh God, I don't remember the name of the lead actress, but she was so aggravating in this film, and I was like, I could not stand to watch her. And the whole rest of the film kind of like falls apart because I do not care about this protagonist or like the actress portraying her. And split personality trans Robert Downey Jr. is like also not doing us any favors. It's just like painful. Number 110, Pandemonium. My letterboxd is either people who like equally hate this film and people who are singing its praises. So this may or may not be controversial. So kind of like Scary Movie, this is like another parody film, but like specifically from the 80s, like parodying horror up to that point. Just super unfunny. I was not into it at any point, and I wish it were better. Number 111, Blood is Blood. Just an incredibly confusing film because it would not have taken much to like slightly re-edit it or even just like add in a scene or two of like explanation for like any of the characters' motivations or mental states, but they don't have any of that, so you're mostly just watching like a really fucked up family be weird and fucked up with no rationale behind it and no like, I don't even remember how this film ends. I just remember like chunks of the first 30 minutes. I remember there's like a dead sister who is like a ghost. Like it's kind of like Sixth Sense-ish. Yeah, none of this film has stuck with me outside of like guy in dress. Number 112, Who Wears Ma? Or I think like the translation is like The Entity. Almost interesting film. Again, I want to watch a better copy that isn't like the YouTube rip upload. I feel like this film wanted to be like a possession film, but also an abusive household film, but also like, there's just so much happening. Overlong and like kind of gratuitous in its cruelty, and like, it feels like it almost wants to say something about like patriarchal violence and how like that affects young girls, but it comes across more as like, oh, girls will transgenderify themselves in order to avoid abuse, and that's totally a thing that happens. Yeah, when it's not boring, it's confusing and vaguely offensive. Number 113, Victim. This is the worst The Skin I Live In film. It is worse. Number 114, Faceless. I watched this film within the last year, and I do not remember a fucking thing about it. All I remember is what my Letterboxd review tells me, which was that this is not good. 115, Red Room. I mean, my mutual who is into a lot more torture porny films seems to like it, so if that's your crowd, there you go. I am not into that, and so this film was mostly boring and vaguely gross, and I'm just not, no. So 116 and 117 are Sleepaway Camps 2 and 3, because fuck these films. 2 is at least, I'll rewatch it eventually. I want 2 to be good because I want adult Angela. I want more Angela in general. I want more Sleepaway Camp films, and I want better Sleepaway Camp films. What we have is not great, and 3 is definitely the worst one. These films were fine when they were unintentionally engaging with camp, and the more intentionally goofy they get, just like the worse they are, the angrier I get. Number 118 with Night Train. Again, another one that I've watched in the last year that I fucking do not remember this one. What I do remember is Steve Zahn. I remember the girl from The Wicker Man, and I remember that fucking Rocker Whore is in this as like a disguised cross-dressing like assassin. And I remember that like specifically irritated me because at the time I watched the film, I was writing about Richard O'Brien, that's his name. I was writing about him and his like issues with transmisogyny. So like writing about that and then like also watching this film just like was like the perfect storm of nope. Oh no, I did have a lower giallo. Number 119, A Blade in the Dark. Yeah, I think this one is so low because like I very specifically remember it having like major issues with my auditory processing, and just like any film that like has really bad or just like intense sound is like a big, I can't do those. Content-wise, I remember being like mostly confused and or bored. The gore scenes are interesting, and I can like see why it got the film like taken off of its initial like televised release that was planned. But besides like that, it's not good. I don't like it. Number 120, The Tenant. It's still not too late to do this to the actual Roman Polanski. God bless you guys who can actually like watch films of these kinds of directors and not like immediately want to throw up on inside your mouths. I couldn't do that. I was very happy to see this guy tortured for like 90 minutes. But even besides that, just like, I'm not a fan. 121, Switch Killer. I mean, it doesn't look good. It's not acted good. The story content is shit. I don't know whether or not this is just like some random guy trying to make an exploitation film, or if this is like actually what he believes. I don't know. I don't care. His film is stupid and goes on too long despite it being like super short. Just, yeah, not into it. Number 122, There's Someone Inside Your House. I feel like my like rage toward this film has like softened over time. Still not good. Still like a frustrating wannabe horror film that's like dancing around inside the skin of like a romantic dramedy. It's just weird tonally, makes changes from the book that like I don't understand narratively, and I don't understand in just like the logistical sense. Like I don't know why you reimagine a trans character. I don't know why you don't like characters who die in the film don't die in the book, and vice versa. I think from like what I vaguely remember of the book, just like Netflix keeps ruining shit for us, man. Number 123, Tales from the Lodge. This is just another one that is like super boring and just like frustratingly offensive in its final third. I've had no urge to rewatch this outside of like wanting to affirm that my hatred for it is valid. All right, and so we're doing 124, 125, and 126 in one big old bunch. Lakshmi, Muni 2, and Tartegi. I'm butchering the fuck out of that one, but yeah. So these are all they're all the same fucking film. They are all the exact same film with like minor tweaks and adjustments. So Muni 2 came first, then Tartegi, and then Lakshmi is the most recent version of it. Lakshmi I have as like the higher film because it is technically like the highest budget and just like the more visually compelling of the three films. Muni 2 is fine. It's equally the same as Lakshmi, if not slightly lesser. Tartegi, I don't remember what country specifically this is from, but it's like clearly a lot more low budget. They just like, I think this is like, it's either this one or another one that's like the unofficial remake that like really enhances the Made in the Backyard feel. I like none of those films, and the fact that I still have like 2 more of those remakes to watch makes me want to die. 127, Ghostland. How anybody engages with the H.P. Lovecraft subplot in this film and gives it a positive rating is beyond me. Frustrating in the sense that like I think the director either did an interview or this is just like the general consensus about the film, where it's like, oh, we're like distilling horror down to like this like very basic thing, and it's like, no, it's still fucking, you need, I don't know how to verbalize it. This film makes me angry for some reason because I think it wants to be better than just like brutalizing women, but it also then becomes a film that is nothing but brutalizing women. 128, Assassination Nation. Another one that I probably should rewatch, but I'm just like super not into. I have a special piece of hatred in my soul for films that are like very pointedly marketed as feminist and are only feminist really in the sense of like featuring women. Like I have the similar problem with this that I had with All Cheerleaders Die, where it's like, oh no, we're a feminist horror film. And it's like, no, you're just like a horror film starring women where women are still like brutally sexually assaulted and like attacked. And again, the fucking scene where Hari Nef is like being lynched, but they're like, don't worry, we're gonna properly gender you the whole time we're lynching you. Like, we are very equal opportunity lynchers. Like, 129, 32 Malasanya Street. Really strong opening 30 minutes. I really did enjoy like the first like portion of this film. And then as soon as the youngest brother like vanishes, you just get this sense of repetition where it's like, okay, I've seen this scene in this film like 10 times already. And then it goes on to the trans stuff, and then that's kind of when you're like, okay, fuck you, like I'm over this. Number 130, Nightcaller. Chad Farron can go fuck himself. That is the official stance of trans horror. Chad Farron is a bigoted right-wing fucking grifter. He is making bullshit films for bullshit money. Yeah, and the less I say about his films, the better. Nightcaller is what people seem to think Dress to Kill is, which really pisses me off on behalf of Dress to Kill, because Dress to Kill, I think there at least like is an argument for like a sympathetic lens that you can like view that film through. Nightcaller is just like straight up just like a 90-minute rambling of a guy about like, oh, the trannies are gonna like scalp all the real women in the world, and that's bad because trannies are bad. It's just like, fuck you, dude. 131, Corbin Nash. I feel like I should remember more about this film besides Corey Feldman to have it this low. But the other main thing that I do remember about it is that it's the kind of film where they could not get two actors in a scene together. So they had to edit it in a way in which like one actor is totally breaking down the door that this other actress is behind on, bro. Like, totally, trust me, they're totally in the same room doing this. The weirdest attempt to like launch a franchise I think I have ever seen. Because like, I'm sorry, you're not, it's been 5 years. I don't think you're getting Corbin Nash 2, guys. 132, The Deep Ones. Yeah, at least where Nightcaller is like competently shot and looks like a film, The Deep Ones just straight up looks like softcore porn and is bad in all the ways that Nightcaller is too, but worse. 133, Backwoods. I own this one on DVD. I think the fact that the film's either star or director has this rated a half star on Letterboxd has to make me like a little bit more sympathetic towards it, because I think he's in on it. I think he's in on the joke. But yeah, it's a guy's like 2001 shot on video, just like home movie in the woods of like wannabe trauma. Like it's not good. I can't recommend in good conscience you do what I did and seek this out by buying the DVD. Number 134, Truth or Dare. Pretty much just like torture porn that does not even have the budget to do proper torture porn. And I feel like if you're going to do like an exploitation film where there's like nudity and sex stuff and violence, you need to have actors who are like willing to do that stuff, and you're not clearly cutting around the gruesomeness and the sexuality of it because your actors aren't comfortable doing like simulating this stuff. But maybe that's just me. And also I feel like I'm a lot more lenient to like random bursts of transphobia if the film itself is like better. But this is a film that is like bad and looks like shit and then throws random transphobia in there. And that's like the click of my like, nope, fuck you, like my meter. 135, Cynthia. Okay, so remember how I said that I don't like Texas Chainsaw? I also really, really do not like Rob Zombie. I know that this is not a Rob Zombie film, but it has like 3 of his main cast. And so this still feels like a Rob Zombie film. In that sense, and also in the sense that it irritated the fuck out of me. I'm sure the main girl, whose name I can't remember, is like a totally fine person, a human being. She just really, really irritated me in this film. And it's just like, I feel like calling it anti-gay is like overreacting, but it's also like, I forgot where my train of thought was going. Basically, this is just like boring and shrill and just like not, yeah, I never want to rewatch this movie. 136, Rotten Romance. I think this one is from like Norway or Sweden or somewhere in the Scandinavias. It's like a short film. There's like 3 segments. Only one of them is like concerned with transness. I watched all 3 segments. None of them are really good. It's just kind of like somebody's fucking around with a camera in their mom's house. Can't recommend you seek out the copy I watched on YouTube. 137, Leprechaun in the Hood. I found out about this film because my friends and I were watching the kill count for this movie, and we saw the trans woman, and I immediately wanted to kill myself. Really irritating, really just like shitty, bad jokes, bad horror, just bad. 138, Secret Santa. Fuck this film. Did you ever want Rob Zombie to have a cast of unlikable characters screaming at each other for like 90 minutes while nobody satisfyingly dies to justify the fact that you just spent so much time with this awful family screaming at each other? If you want that, Secret Santa is the film for you. This genuinely was a film that I would have turned off if I had not been told by several people that it featured a trans character, and I was like 80% of the way through it, and nobody had shown up yet, and I was genuinely like, where the fuck is this character? And sure enough, she gets revealed in like the last 10 minutes because she's played by a cis woman. And because that's like the funny twist is like, haha, she's like super hot and sexual the whole film, but she actually has a dick the whole time, and it's like, cool, go fuck yourself. 139, Famine. The first of several Ryan Nicholson films on this bottom half of the list. I feel like this one is higher because it was the one that I watched the most recently, and is ergo the one that I watched like the most recently in relationship to my relationship with Ryan Nicholson. It's complicated. I'll get into it more when like we hit the last Ryan Nicholson film on the list. I feel like just like by the third film I watched of his, I got the shtick, I got what he was going for, and just like, it's still not a film that I am going to intentionally revisit, nor is it a film that I think like looks or sounds great, but it's at this point that I'm like, okay, like it's no longer an assault on all like 12 of my senses. 140, Ticked Off Trannies with Knives. And this one is the highest of the Israel Luna films on this list. Still a piece of shit, still just like objectively not good and irritating and a waste of a concept, but it is viewable in a way that his other films on this list aren't. Speaking of which, 141, Dead Don't Die in Dallas. So this film is like technically a sequel to Ticked Off Trannies, but did not come out for like 10 years, despite the fact that they were kind of filmed back to back. And you can tell it feels very much like a zombie parody satire of like the zombie stuff that was coming out in the early 2010s. Interesting in the sense that like it depicts a trans character and has several characters from Ticked Off Trannies return as well, but also features a then closeted trans guy in a role where he's like gendered male despite like intending to be a lesbian. Just like weird things that they could never have intended while filming, but like make the film slightly interesting, but like that is the only thing they have going for them. 142, Vultures. I feel like this would be easier to watch if the only copy that I had wasn't a shitty VHS rip. For what it is boring and dumb, and I wish I could see anything that was happening in the movie. 143, Dr. Kim Hunter and the Apparition. So this is not technically an Israel Luna film. He did not direct nor write this. He did produce it, however, and Chaselyn Wade is in both Ticked Off Trannies and Dead Don't Die in Dallas. She's a longtime collaborator. I call this like the spiritual third Israel Luna film. The worst shot, bad acting, bad writing, nothing in it makes sense. And I cannot stress how underused of like a plot point it is that our main character is trans. Because like you look at the plot summary and you're like, okay, here is a trans girl who has to go back home to deal with like some kind of haunting. But like none of that is actually the plot. Because there's like, okay, like the opening like 15 minutes is kind of funny because there's like some really good like bad kid acting. But besides that, it's just like a bunch of adults who are either trying really hard or like visibly not trying at all. And it's just like, it's so long, it's so boring, like nothing makes sense. Every single line delivery is the most painful thing in existence, and I hate it. Number 144, with Serial Caller. I know that I said that Suki Bon Boy was like softcore porn, but like somehow Serial Caller still feels like super softcore pornish. Looks really, really gross, bad acting, stupid plot, is mostly just an excuse to like see women in various stages of undress and also being like strangled, which feels like increasingly like fetishistic as we go on. And yeah, I have, like, again, Suki Boy made me feel less dirty than Serial Caller, and Suki Boy had like 75 times more nudity. At 1:45, La Petite Mort 2. This film is nothing but a compilation of gore sequences that I could not even see on my copy of the film alone. I wish I had more to justify why this is so low beyond the fact that just like it aggravated me to have to like click through so many scenes of poorly shot gore. Like, okay, strip to kill, a lot of strip scenes. You can at least see the strip scenes. I can't see any of like the hacking and slashing happening in this film. And that's an issue, and that's like the whole crux of your film. 1:46, Curse of the Queer Wolf. There are few things that get on my nerves more in this world than discount shitty trauma wannabes. This film just feels like it was made by bigots or people who don't care or don't like gay or trans people. The fact that this was made and came out at like the crux of the AIDS crisis just like is like a little extra mwah on like the grossness pile. The fact that the lead actor like straight up stopped showing up to set one day is really super funny. Besides that, just like a really shitty, unfunny comedy that is just like makes you sad. Number 147, The Newly Deads. I'd say shitty trauma knockoff, but this one actually is a trauma release, so I think I actually have the DVD for this now, so I might have to rewatch it in like a quality that is not the shitty VHS rip that I initially watched, because a lot of my issues were I can't see anything that's happening. Although my second issue was I don't know or care who any of these people are because there are too many of them. And I have a feeling that that will not go away on repeat viewings. And just, yeah, really irritating, strange Doug Jones cameo for some reason before he was like an actual like notable person. Yeah. Number 148, Hanger. Hi again, Ryan Nicholson. This one is on here for like a very beginning Lloyd Kaufman cameo, which I wish I liked Lloyd Kaufman more than I do, but there's just been, for every good thing that I see him do, there's like another thing that he does that like irritates the fuck out of me, and I'm like, please just like pick a lane. So Hanger, I think I turned it off with like 10 or 20 minutes left just because I realized that Lloyd Kaufman was not coming back and the rest of the film was just like grimy and dirty, and it's everything you expect from a Ryan Nicholson film if you're like familiar with his filmography, and just, yeah, not doing it for me. So at number 149 with an average viewer rating of 1.9, Train of the Dead. Genuinely like incomprehensible in terms of like its editing and its story, and just like everything about it makes for a film that is just like completely unwatchable. And like I completely like this is one of the few films on this list where like I completely understand why everybody else has also decided to like fuck this movie. Not watchable, not fun, not scary, just like confusing and irritating and not worth your time. And number 150 with an average viewer rating of 2.3, Gutterballs. Yeah, to the surprise of like literally fucking nobody. Okay, so let's acknowledge like one or two things first. There are worse films on this list in terms of story, in terms of like trans depiction, in terms of technical filmmaking. There are other films on this list that I have like stopped watching and like not gone back to. There are uglier films, there are films with like worse effects, but I think that Gutterballs like genuinely deserves to be the bottom spot because I genuinely think that that's what Ryan Nicholson would have wanted. So I've kind of hinted at it like earlier, but even though I definitely have my opinions on his films and like the things he has said in interviews that have definitely rubbed me the wrong way sometimes, I have heard nothing but good things about like who Ryan Nicholson was like as a person, as a man. And I really wish that this weird like parasocial like Dingleberg dynamic that I've come up with for us in our head like could be reciprocated, because I like genuinely think that like Ryan Nicholson would have fun like reciprocating it and escalating it and like playing around with it. Like, I don't know. I've gone from like unironically like hating him to having this weird like not respect but like acceptance for him as I like slowly cut my way through his filmography. So a posthumous congratulations to Ryan. Gutterballs remains my least favorite transgender horror film of all time, and I do not think that you would have it any other way. And now onto the good films, where I can continue to not properly articulate myself. 75, we have Boarding School. More in terms of just like its visual style and the ideas that it was like trying to engage with. Yeah, I wish I liked it more, but it's not like the worst. 74, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Let's Do the Time Warp Again. Already starting off controversial. This is not a good film, but I grew up on High School Musical, and I am not immune to propaganda. I do have a video essay in the works where I talk a lot more about this film and the ways specifically in which it fails, so I'll save like all of that for later. For right now though, again, this might be a they/them situation of like Stockholm Syndrome, but I watched it like 3 or 4 times. The music is, for the most part, if it's not good, but it's catchy in a way that like my brain responds to. We'll call that one a guilty pleasure and move on. Number 73, House at the End of the Street. Not a film that I have seen since like literally I started this whole project. So my memory of it is super vague and fuzzy, but from what I remember, just like totally standard, like 2000 slasher. I have nothing for it much either way. Number 72, The Wild Boys. Oh, weird French art house shit. More captivating and like its depictions of gender than like any of the actual just like text of it, if that makes sense. Honestly, like a little bit boring on the slow side, but I think it's worth checking out for just like the weird what the fuckness of it. Oh, speaking of what the fuckness, 71, Sissy Sorcery. So this is probably the 3rd softcore porn that I have on here. I hesitate to say much because I don't want to like accidentally be offensive on what is clearly supposed to be like performance art. Yeah, if you're into watching silhouetted porn over a repeating loop of like degradation text, check out Sissy Sorcery. Number 70, Hide and Go Shriek. Most of my memories of this movie are like laughing at various reaction shots and some of just like the weirder like effects of late 80s slashers. Probably not good, but I have a soft spot for it. I remember more of its visuals than I do anything else. It's fine. Number 69, Terror Firmer. I have watched this film once while I was incredibly stoned, so take my opinion on this one with a grain of salt. It's fine. Most of the jokes land. Like, there are like large chunks of time where like they don't. But by and large, like I think it's one of the more like successful trauma films in the regard that like it made me not suicidal. Number 68, Too Scared to Scream. If you ever wanted to know what an Ian McShane version of Norman Bates looked like, go no further. I remember very little of this movie beyond the fact that it was like one of the few trans horror films that like actually surprised me in who its antagonist was. Because like, vague spoilers, but it's not Ian McShane, Norman Bates, even though like it's so clearly doing like that thing that you're just like, oh, clearly it's going for that. And like, it is genuinely surprising when they don't go that route. Beyond that, just like perfectly serviceable slasher, worth it specifically for like Ian McShane alone. Number 67, the Psycho remake from 1998. Again, controversial. I do not know that I would call this film good. However, I am like genuinely captivated by like the experiment behind it and how like you can shot for shot remake something that is like no different in its text or visual presentation, but is different in like the actors and the cinematic knowledge that you assume an audience to have, and how that impacts like enjoyment and understanding of a film itself. And like there are some things that like the film does differently that I find equally fascinating, mostly with its like sound design and how it uses the score. I think this is more than like the shitty cash grab remake that it has like the reputation of being, but I also like I understand why it has that reputation, but I do not think it is deserved. Number 66, The Oracle. This one is a weird one. Tentatively, it is one of like the more interesting, like, I don't think it's like a proper giallo. I think it's one of like the American imitations of one. Just like a really good atmosphere, honestly. Like visually, it's a beautiful film. One of the more like surreal depictions of gender within it. A lot of the film is already lost to my bad short-term memory, but from what I recall of it, it's just like one of the more interesting like spins on like American giallo that I can like think of. Number 65, Sweep Away Hungry Ghosts. Okay, so I'm not like the biggest fan of like the content of this piece, but just in terms of like visual like presentation and construction, this is like probably the most beautiful film on like the trans horror list. And I wish that like, even if it didn't necessarily have more substance to go along with the style, that the substance was like a little less like icky. Number 64, A Woman Kills. It's funny because like I think my only friend who has seen this like outright hated it and called it like the French 60s Nightcaller, which I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can kind of understand where that is coming from. The difference to me between something like A Woman Kills and something like Nightcaller, where it is just like a trans person killing a bunch of women, and that's pretty much all there is to it, is that this one at least feels like it is trying to like do multiple levels of commentary on what was at the time like a super like intense like French political period, and it feels like the point is not dehumanization of trans people. It's more of like, look at what war turns the men into. And yeah, that's not like necessarily better in the sense that like it's still utilizing trans aesthetics and a trans character to like convey those ideologies. But I don't know, for like a weird kind of like montage-y film where you watch a bunch of violence and a bunch of like softcore nudity, it's not like the worst. I enjoyed myself for what I saw of it. Number 63, Slice. It's funny because like I don't love this movie, but the more I reflect upon it, the more I like remember of it, and the more I like find myself willing to kind of like engage with what it wanted to do or what it thought it was. I don't know. There's something under the surface of this movie that I want to like scratch at, because again, it's not good. I would actively say that it is actively not good. But there is something about just like its ruminations on like everything happening with the two characters as kids, and then just like the idea that you could transition and start fucking your best friend while also killing all of your childhood bullies around him. It's almost pulpy in a way that I kind of enjoy, and it's one of the ones that like I'm more actively interested in seeking out to rewatch. Number 62, Ticks. So this one also comes out of like the bite-sized Halloween stuff. Just this really grimy kind of cool like gay vampire short film. But you know, I thought its vibes were good. I thought like the vampire effects were fun. I thought just like the subtext of abuse was really like subtle and deftly handled. I would encourage seeking it out. Number 61, with Terror Sisters. This is one that I wanted to like it more than I did. And I think it's just because like the tonal jumps it has to make are just like a little bit too far to the extremes for it to like successfully work as I think it wants to. There are some segments that like really, really do work though, and those are the segments that I enjoyed the best. Definitely stretching the definition of horror, but I think in terms of like French short films on this list, it's one of the better ones. Number 60, Monster Dyke. I mean, for that title alone, high rating. But yeah, definitely feels like of the Tumblr era, aided by the fact that it like literally starts off with like a Tumblr post as its like epigraph. But yeah, just like, again, like kind of softcore porny, but like in a way that is like about trans pleasure more so than like a trans objectification of aesthetics, if that is a sentence that makes cohesive sense. Yeah, I don't know if this one is like streaming outside of festival circuits yet, but like if and when it does, like 100% like go check it out. This has its audience, and I know that it's all of you freaks. Number 59, Sonny Boy. Almost entirely on the merit of how weird it is to see a transgender David Carradine treated seriously. There's also just something to like the look of a late 80s film that like itches the right spot in my brain. I love the way this film looks. I love the way it just like is basically a horror cartoon in live action. Yeah, it's not good, but like it's fun, and I like fun. Number 58, He Lives by Night. I feel like I don't have a lot to say, besides most of the comedy in this is not good. The horror sequences are some of the most upsetting that I have seen in a long time. And I am just going to replay the Pepsi scene because I think that's my favorite scene in any movie ever. Number 57, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. Something about just like the aesthetic of this film and like looking at it and seeing how it handles like such a binary jump between like the two genders. I like it. I think it's interesting. So I'm gonna like go off on a side tangent and talk about like the new Dr. Jekyll that they're going to be making with Eddie Izzard, because the director like very recently talked about it, and they were like, yeah, like our story is not going to be about gender, which, considering your lead actress is trans, like has me concerned, because I think it should be. Maybe not necessarily in the way that like Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde is, but I think that if you're like having this body horror, body swap narrative, it kind of has to be about gender, you know? So we'll see how that pans out. Number 56, Santa Sangre. Again, I'm sure I'm butchering the fuck out of that name. Very visually striking. I'm going to recall that I was mostly just kind of like confused and bored while watching it, while also acknowledging that like I have the attention span of a rabbit. Warrants a rewatch, I'm sure. It's just one of those things that like I have to actively make myself willing to do. Number 55, Homicidal. I mean, for like all of the blatant knockoffs on this list, I think Homicidal is like A, probably one of the most blatant, and B, also just kind of like fun 60s cheese. Like, I don't know, like we say exploitation film now, and it's like so much nudity and so much gore and so much just like gross stuff that like the 60s equivalent of an exploitation film is just kind of like quaint and adorable and like contrast to all that. It has a soft spot for me. I don't know. Number 54, Deadly Blessing. I have yet to find a Wes Craven film that I did not secretly love. Like, it's not the most compelling film in terms of like what it's like, oh, like a religious colony and next door there's a girl who's like being haunted by crazy people. That is kind of just like a meh plot, like I could live or die without it. And I think this is mostly just like a vibes one, because the plot is not really anything special. Don't really care about any of these characters, but just like the look of the film and just like the aesthetics of it, again, the way that the 80s were shot is just like beautiful. Yeah, and Wes Craven, I don't think like, you know, haven't watched all his films, but Wes Craven has not had a miss yet. Number 53, with Surrender Dorothy. This one is so strange because it's not even like a horror film in the traditional sense, but it's like, I don't know, just like something about the look of it, something about the fact that it is like literally the writer-director playing this force femmed character. Like, I feel there are layers here that we are only like catching a slight glimpse of, and those layers are fucking fascinating to me. I also think it's funny that like the director has like a slight beef with Elizabeth Banks because she like degraded that this was like the first movie she was ever in. I would actually like to back the director up on this one because this is an amazing first film to be like your debut. And just like, what a fucking conversation starter. Number 52, Cherry Falls. Again, warrants a rewatch because I feel like I should love this movie. My memory of it is mostly kind of like middle of the road. Like, oh, it's fine. Like, fine on the side of like better. Again, love our lead actress. Love like the spin on the slasher formula. Love just like the look of everything. I wish the film were a little less like rape-centric, but besides that, it's like it's on its way. Number 51, Sick Nurses. Oh, where this film could be on this list were it not for the blackface. Again, like I'm sure that there's somebody out there who's gonna tell me that like it's not actually blackface or something. I don't care. This makes me uncomfortable. Besides that, just like the visual style of this film is up there among like the most beautiful things I have seen in the context of this list. And I wish like once the film like gets a little more linear and you like start to understand where all these like disjointed scenes at the beginning are like in the context of and where they're coming from, like I love that film. It just needs like a few more tweaks and it's like really something special. For what it is, though, like, totally serviceable. I think it's worth a watch. Number 50, Rough Draft. I file this one under another guilty pleasure. I like Gary Oldman being romantically pursued by the guy from the 90s Mummy films. It's not good, but it's just, like, so cheesy and, like, the kind of homoerotic that I think we all kind of love, that I'm like, okay, this should not have flown under the radar for as long as it has, if for no other reason than seeing Gary Oldman in drag. Gary Oldman, Gary Busey, holy shit. Gary Oldman is not in this film. Gary Busey is, though. Yeah, and we're gonna end this before I keep talking about Gary Oldman. Number 49, Strange Circus. Mostly this dropped quite a few spots because of the sexual abuse allegations that have come out about Sion Sono in the past year, because now all of his films focusing so heavily on sexual abuse are really, really uncomfortable. Putting all of that in a box to the side, I still think that there are really engaging threads here about like identity in the face and in the like subsequent aftermath of abuse. The mystery of the second half of the film was pretty fun, and there's like so many striking visuals just like scattered throughout. And I think that like however you find that the film answers that thesis, there is still like a character who is like heavily in control of his own identity, and just like you rarely get that in this canon. So that strikes me as like unique and significant. But this was also already like a devastatingly depressing film, and I think its heavy focus on like sexual abuse like would be enough to turn like most people off of it. Sion Sono like also probably being a predator is like probably it's a beautiful film, but I'm probably never going to watch it again. Number 48, Unhinged. I know like throughout all of the negative list I'm like I don't like vibes, but like all in the positive list I'm like but the vibes. Genuinely though, like Unhinged is like Northwestern America, like Oregon core, like distilled down to its like, oh god, it's I've never been to Oregon, but like I feel like I am like physically inside of Oregon when I am watching this film. Just like a really, really strange slasher. Like it feels almost like The Skeleton of One. Not a great twist, but like I feel like for like the kind of low budget thing we're working with here, it is one of the better like examples of his genre. 47, Black Pill. So this one I came across because the director's partner, who is also a director and like film curator, sent me a message about this. And it is like this really fascinating little short film about like, I don't even know how to describe it properly without sounding like a dunce. Basically it's just like about identity like being sold back to you in a digital age. Very timely, very relevant. I don't know if it is like publicly available. If it is, I'm sure myself in editing will like flash a text on whether or not I'm a dumbass or not. But yeah, it is worth seeking out if it is. Number 46, So Vam. I feel like a monster that this is not higher because everybody else I know seems to love this film. I have not revisited it since I initially watched it, and I have the feeling that my opinion might change upon a reviewing. But from what I recall of this film is mostly just that it is a very good first film for a teenager to have made, but I do not get much like actual enjoyment out of it. Like as a historian, I love this film. I love like everything that it engages with. I love like what it means for the genre, all caps. But as like a casual film goer, this is like, there's something about the vibe that does not match with what I typically enjoy in like campy kind of horror movies. So it's not bad, it's just like not for me. Number 45, We're All Going to the World's Fair. This movie is so divisive. This is probably the easiest I've gotten through a movie this slow. That being said, I've had no urge to rewatch it because I feel like my ease in watching it the first time was because I didn't know where it was going and because I was like not sure of what the content was going to be. And so now that I've seen it, I feel like it would be a lot harder for me to watch knowing what specifically it amounts to in every single scene. That being said, like lead performance is amazing. The camera work I think is really well done. Like the general plot and like concept is really interesting. I wish I liked it more, but for what it is, I think I'm on like the more positive side of like the critical consensus and stuff. Number 44, They Suck. So this is like a non-binary vampire film out of, I think, the UK. And it was crowdfunded a little while ago, had like its online, I don't know if it's like, it definitely has been going through festivals. I don't know if it has like a proper online release yet. Again, I'm sure my editing text will let me know if I'm a dumbass. God, the enthusiasm on display here is really, really something to behold. I wish that there was like a little more of like a cohesive plot or just like thread between these characters and like resolution and like the conflicts that are introduced. But like considering this is like the second film on this list where like a bunch of trans teenagers are running around in front of a camera pretending to be vampires, I think that the short film version of like They Suck works more for me than the 70 minutes of So Vam, because So Vam feels like it is stretching a little bit of material out into a lot, and They Suck feels more like it is like compressing a bunch of material into like a very short period of time. And in both cases, I wish that like the timing were better for both, but I think that I prefer like the shorter version of like short and compact as opposed to like longer form and like a little like too strung along. 43 was Switch. Not a short film I have revisited since like my initial like write-up of trans horror, but from what I remember, just like a really just like impactful short film about like what it feels like to have a body that is not like cooperating with you. And I don't know how to put it beyond like good visuals, good vibes, I don't know. Number 42, Knife Heart. Definitely one that I think with one or two tweaks could have been really great. But for what we have, I do enjoy this more than I would say like most giallos. Yeah, really good vibes. I think like the ending is one of like definitely the more impactful endings that I have seen on this list. Just like if it were like a little bit less sexual assaulty with its main relationship, then like I think this could be like a very fun giallo. I prefer Islands more, but for the only feature film of this director that I have seen, like it's a pretty like solid entry. Number 41, The Little Girl Who Was Too Fond of Matches. Interesting plot in terms of like autonomy and like coming into yourself. Don't know if that works so well in like the trans context of the story, but like, I don't know, there's a soft spot in my heart for this one. Number 40, Seed of Chucky. I understand why this one is like the lowest ranked in the cinematic context of Chucky. you know, like it's not a good looking film, and I do have like, I think the same problems that like most people do with like the humor's not really my style, and like Glenda is terrifying. But I think in a post Lachlan Watson world, this film is a lot more interesting to like examine as non-binary identity, even just in the sense of like 2004 versus 2022, like how these depictions change and or evolve. Like probably personally like not my favorite of the Child's Play films, but like still like it's a Child's Play film, it's good. 39, First Date. Or as I call it, the good Hari Neff movie on this list. It's interesting because I think my definition of what I count as trans horror has like subtly changed. Because I counted this one as trans horror like pretty immediately just because I'm like, oh, Hari Neff is in it, of course. And a lot more recently I have become more critical on how I view like trans actors like playing cis characters, and if we are to understand like every character that a trans person plays as a trans character. Way bigger discussion than I can like fit into this video. I'm writing something about it now to get my thoughts out, but in the sense that like, oh, this is like a very quaint short film about just like a trans witch keeping a girl like locked in this time loop. It's cute. I think it's like definitely like probably the best of like the Hulu bite-sized Halloween stuff that we have for this list. Number 38, Bad Girl Boogie. I've been calling this Bad Girl Bogey in my brain for like a year now. Not really like a giallo, quote unquote, but like enough of a spin on that kind of like style of film that I find just like more interesting in like a filmmaking sense and in a story sense than like I found So Vam. This one is like finally starting to see like a wider release outside of festivals. Some weird stuff in there in terms of like the history of the antagonist. I have a feeling that like when people see this film, they will know what I mean. It's like a 2-second historical footage shot that I question its inclusion. But outside of that, meh. A film that I just enjoyed more than So Vam in the sense that like I thought the visual style of this film was a lot more like cohesive and a lot just like better looking in general. I thought it was just like really fun and like a very moody piece that was like different than like something. So Vam isn't like happy-go-lucky, but it's a lot more upbeat than something like Bad Girl Boogie. And I don't know, something about just like the vibe of Bad Girl Boogie like spoke to me. Number 37, Wendell and Wild. It's funny, this is like kind of high up on the list, but also like I did not love this film. And I'm apparently in the minority on that one. I thought that this film tried to juggle too much for what it like had the ability to focus on. Like I feel like any one of its subplots could have been like entire films on their own, and I really just like I felt that throughout the film where I'm like, you could be focusing more on like 2 of these subplots instead of like the 5 that we have. But I mean, it's horror's first official trans guy in terms of like explicit representation, so like I can't be too mad at it. Number 36, Frankenstein Created Woman. I mean, it's Peter Cushing. It's like late 60s Hammer horror, like as it's starting to die off. It's like the foppiest villains that I've probably ever seen. It's a little on the slow side, but in terms of just like body swap horror, it's one of like the more literal ones. Like plus this and Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, it's just like very literal like swapping of the binaries, and I find it fun and interesting when the films are just kind of like so literal in their interpretations. Number 35, Alien. Yeah. Alien is good. I enjoy it. I went to like see it in the theater when it was re-released a few years ago. It just, for whatever reason, like it registers in my brain that it is like a good movie. But I don't know. Like for me, it's just kind of like slow, and I wish that I liked it more than I do because I know that I should like it more than I do, but just kind of like, I don't know. It's like a solid 3.5 in my brain. Like it's good, but I feel like it could be better, and there's just like something about it that I'm not like completely enraptured with. I don't know. It's good. It's just not like great. Number 34, Meta. This film still has not like come out of its festival circuit, and it's driving me a little crazy. Like first of all, we need more werewolf trans horror films. Like please, somebody else get on that. But for what we have, I think Meta is like a pretty decent rumination on like what it feels like to like have a betrayal of the body, specifically in a high school context. And for the two like Carrie light films that we have on this list, Meta is like far and away better, so much more than Bathroom Troll. I would like to see like a little bit more of a serious take on this, but like I think for what budget this team had, I think going for like a slightly comedic and slightly otherworldly route with the werewolf makeup like probably was the smarter choice. If and when this thing ever sees like a wider public release, I would say it's worth checking out, if not for like the novelty of a trans werewolf film that we don't really have yet. Number 33, Chainsaw Sally. I can't explain why this film just like itches the right part of my brain, because it shouldn't work and it's kind of ugly and I should not enjoy it as much as I did. But I think there's just something about like the dedication that it seemed like everybody had like came through in the film in such a way that like I end up enjoying it as if I were like alongside the ride with them. I don't know if that made sense, but like, I don't know. There's just like a really good feeling to this movie that like carries me through it. Number 32, The Craft Legacy. Yeah, call me a hater, but I liked this film a lot more than like the original Craft. Something about the original Craft just like does not work for me in terms of like the feminist overtones in general, but like something about the way the girls interact with each other. I never get the sense watching that movie of like a group of friends that is genuinely torn apart. And I actually like, I do get that in The Craft Legacy. Like I feel like these girls actually like each other, and I feel like there is like something interesting at stake in like regards to their powers. Like this came out like the year after Black Christmas, so like David Duchovny is not Carrie Elways. However, David Duchovny is like a very funny, like not even trying kind of villain. It's also like barely a horror film and more just kind of like a teen coming of age story. But at the same time, like I found it like a much more captivating rumination on like how masculinity is like ostracized and also victimized and like treated in a modern society that is not all the way just like oh, you're treating men so bad, or oh, men are so great and this turns into evil men. Like it's not as binary as like something like Black Christmas 2019 was. I don't know. I feel like it got like mangled by COVID and not a lot of people saw it. So even like, I think even if you did not like the original Craft, like I didn't, like The Craft Legacy is something like worthy to check out. Number 31, T-Blockers. Alice McKay's most recent film, and I think her best one to date. I go into this film more on the Patreon, and I will avoid talking about it much here because I don't trust my ability to not give spoilers. But I think this film is her best in terms of like focus. I'm glad that she's like finally writing trans woman and it feels like really authentic to her. I wish like the horror were more consistent throughout the story. I feel like large chunks of time go by where like nothing much is happening. But considering like, again, budget and age and experience, Alice is like getting better, and I think T-Blockers is like so far the pinnacle. It's definitely the film that like I had the most enjoyment watching. And yeah, hopefully this one like gets a wider release soon. It like literally just had its first festival release. Bad Girl Boogie like still has yet to even come out properly, so it'll probably be a while before like everybody else sees T-Blockers, but like if you get the chance to go to a festival and see it, 1000% do. Number 30, Paper Girl. Another film that like literally just came out. So this was another crowdfunded horror film out of New York. It is a 5-minute like black and white like shot on film short. Virtually no dialogue, pretty much just like a visual and auditory experience in the sense of like sounds and just like non-speaking sounds. It falls into like the short film problem of I want more and there's not more, and that makes me sad. But for like what it is like visually beautiful. It's like sound-wise gorgeous. Like I cannot stress enough how many films have like broken me just through like bad sound design. And Paper Girl actually feels like one of the few films that like took sound design like very seriously, and I appreciate that so much. Just like a beautiful visual look, a beautiful like rumination on like a trans coming out story, even in the sense that like we don't really get many coming out stories in horror. Like a horror spin on a non-traditional coming out is still a really interesting idea. This film will hopefully get a release like wider sometime soon. Until then, I cannot stress enough, like, follow the Instagram pages, keep up to date. Like, if you are in the wider New York area, there's probably a festival showing near you right now. Please go check it out. This is like a gorgeous fucking film to help support. Number 29, Private Parts. I feel bad because, again, this is one that I have not rewatched since my initial viewing, but I just remember, like, the look of the film, like, really captivating me. The dynamics at play between, like, interpersonal character relationships are just, like, so specific that they're kind of just, like, you are captivated just, like, pure curiosity alone, like, where the fuck is this going? And even though the ending is kind of just, like, a giant question mark of, like, I don't know. Yeah, it has stuck well in my mind, and I still think of it fondly. Number 28, Computer Hearts. This is the lowest of Luis's films, not because it is the least good, but because it is specifically the one I have watched the least, because it is the longest one, and I am a lazy son of a bitch who has no attention span. Also partially because I am waiting to get my VCR fixed so that I can watch, like, the VHS release. Yeah, I mean, what else can I say about this film that I, A, have not already said, or B, has been said by people smarter and better than me? Yeah, just, like, a really fascinating, like, in the middle of, like, it's not pre-coming out, and it's not in the middle of coming out, it's, like, a secret third thing. But it's, like, a beautiful film, it's, like, an intelligent film. It is, like, I love the way that Luis shoots, like, body horror specifically, and just, like, this depersonalization of, like, body parts. It is fascinating. I am, like, super glad that there has been a resurgence of this film. Whether or not I personally had anything to do with that, I don't know. But, like, seeing it get, like, reappraised, like, almost 10 years after it was made has been, like, really, really fulfilling. Because, like, I think it genuinely deserves that. Number 27, Skin Deep. Another one I have not really rewatched since my initial write-ups. A particular looking film, I enjoy the look of it, just, like, very, very 90s. I mean, it's kind of hard to, like, classify this film as a horror film, and I feel like I need to, like, specify that every time I talk about it. But it's also just, like, it's a fun, like, kind of thriller on, like, the trans, like, romantic aggressor, and just, like, seeing how that dynamic plays out. It's a sympathetic lens. I don't know. It was introduced to me by a person that I no longer, like, have any sort of contact with, and that kind of, like, wigs me out a little bit. Not because, like, anything happened, just because he, like, vanished off the face of the internet entirely. And so, like, I kind of associate this film with him, and there's just kind of, like, it's interesting to feel that real world absence alongside this film of, like, a seeking to belong and to be accepted by people. And I don't know, I feel like it has grown fonder in my memory subsequently. Number 26, Tranny Snatchers. Yeah, I know that they're not technically using that name for the film anymore, but I like it better than Snatchers, so I will continue to use it. Basically, like, a DIY, like, if Chainsaw Sally somehow got more DIY filmmaking, that is Tranny Snatchers. Literally just a bunch of, like, Portland people running around, like, not even really having a script, I don't think, just, like, straight up making up their own characters and dialogue. Arguably the best genital mutilation bottom surgery scene I have seen in a film that is, like, not played for horror. Genuinely just, like, a fun movie. This is one of those indie films that, like, falls into the trap of, oh god, the sound design is making my ears bleed. But it is on YouTube for free. It is a very fun watch. I do recommend it if you're, like, a fan of, like, indie filmmakers doing weird shit with horror. Oh god, I'm gonna get in trouble for this one. 25, Cupid's Guillotine. Nobody has seen this film, and it makes me so sad because it is the funniest bad movie I have ever seen. Okay, so I watch a lot of films on Tubi for this list, like, in general, and most of them are just kind of, like, bad and make me hate myself and not funny in the slightest. Cupid's Guillotine, I do not know if this is a film made in, like, earnest or if it is supposed to be, like, intentionally low budget and stupid. Either way, I love this movie. Genuinely some of, like, the goofiest gender stuff I have seen. Female, like, forced masculinization, female to male horror film that also still has the gay guy transitions to a woman to seduce a straight guy trope. It somehow has both of these. and these two characters like literally catfight each other at one point. And the female to male character is literally just like the same actress with like a beard, like 5 o'clock shadow filter on. And like the acting is like exactly what you're expecting for this kind of thing. There's so much stock footage there. I feel like talking about it more is going to like ruin the experience of watching it fresh. So like if you can, go on Tubi right now, watch it, and thank me later. Number 24, Wild Zero. Again, like so much fun. I feel like the comedy would land better for me a second time around because I've only, again, seen this film the once. But like it's so heartfelt, it's so like sincere, and it feels like a movie about space zombies and the power of rock and roll should not make me feel so many things, and yet it does. Number 23, Freaky. I mean, this is probably the Chris Landon film I've liked the most in the sense that like it's a solid 3.5. A lot of plot stuff that I wished was handled a little differently or just like some dialogue delivered slightly differently. I am not generally a fan of Chris Landon. But for what this film is, I do enjoy I enjoy most of its humor. I enjoy most of the performances. I like the visual style of it. I think that Catherine Newton is like generally one of the better actresses like up and coming in horror right now. It's like a little heavy-handed, but for a mainstream slasher, like even tangentially dealing with trans stuff, it's like I think it's one of like the better ones, if not probably like one of the only ones right now. Number 22, A Reflection of Fear. One of the films that I've had like the steepest increase of liking towards. I recently came into ownership of the original screenplay, which has shaped my understanding of the film a lot more, in the sense that I now see all of the gaps where scenes were cut that make the film make like 75% more sense. I don't know why they cut all of these scenes, but for the final product, I still think the film is like a nice little like family drama that like tips head over ass into like a slasher. Again, could have been so much more if the film were like left intact from what it was written to be, but for what exists, like I still think like a really nice and creepy, just kind of like strange incest slasher that is also about like transness. Sleepaway Camp 10 years before Sleepaway Camp. I'm gonna call this card American Giallo. 21, Raising Cain. Again, one that I need to rewatch in like the intended like director's cut version that like De Palma had planned out before the studio interfered. Just John Lithgow is such a fun Giallo villain between this and Blowout. And again, like I think De Palma just like has a lot of fun with like cheating women, crazy men, just like over the top performances. I don't know, like even if it's not like the greatest in terms of like its plot structure, I think just like the performances and just like the vibe of this film are just like so much fun. Number 20, Color of Night. I keep describing this film to people as if De Palma is copying Hitchcock's homework, then this is somebody copying De Palma's homework. Just like a super knockoff American Giallo that is so batshit insane and strange, and yet so visually striking. Like the other day, my friends and I were gonna watch this film, and my friend was like, "Oh, is this the one where like Bruce Willis has the split diopter shot of him and the girl jumping out the window?" And just immediately, like I knew, I'm like, "Yep, Color of Night, that's it." And just like Brad Dourif, Lance Hendrickson, Bruce Willis, just like such a strong, fun cast of like character actors. It's like cheesy in a way that is like definitely not intentional, but like becomes fun as a result of that. And also I think just like even having like a slight knowledge of like the behind the scenes drama about the film, like it is batshit insane and not good, but I have a fucking blast with it every time I watch it, and it's great, so shut up. Number 19, SIDS. I feel like I don't know what else I can say about this movie besides good. A good short film, which is like a good short film for me is like hard to pin down because there are so many short films where I'm like, I wish this were longer. I wish this were like shorter somehow, because some short films are like 20 minutes long and can just be like 5. And so this is just like a nice tight 5 of like, damn, fatherhood and balls are a fucked up concept. Get them out. And like, it's funny because I say that, and I say that with the full knowledge that Luis is currently making a 6.5-hour adaptation of this concept. which I'm still excited for, you know? I'm like, why the fuck would I not be? But yeah, the original short film is just like really good, succinct, like straight to the point. Fucking the best cock and ball mutilation I have probably ever seen and hopefully ever will see. Number 18, Titane. It's funny because I technically like her other film Raw more than Titane, but just in terms of like playing with gender and like concepts of masculinity, this film is really fun. And even just like I'm not going to say her name because I'm going to butcher it, but I love this director's like visual style. I love like the way she works with actors. I love the way she portrays like violence as like these like harsh little outbursts of things. And I mean, like, I thought Raw was like a pretty decent like transmasculine allegory, and this just like ups that by like 20. And I know that she's like, I guess, working on her third film, and I'm like so excited because I'm just like, please, you're so close to just like finally making that transmasculine horror film. Please just do it. Number 17, AI Mama. I mean, probably on par with Paper Girl in terms of like its visual, just like perfection. Again, super short, super to the point. I don't think you could like distill this film into anything like, not smaller and more basic, but like you could not distill this film into anything like more pure than it already is. And again, I'm sure like half of this film is like flying over my head as somebody who is not like super into like cyberpunk, techno, like that kind of styling aesthetic. Like entirely on visuals alone, this is like absolutely one of the more captivating short films. Number 16, Queerant. It's occurring to me as I'm reading this card that I've never heard this word said out loud before. So I've been calling it queerant this whole time, but I'm fully aware that it might be queerant. And I am a college graduate not knowing the difference. I still can't believe that I even know that this movie exists because it was by total accident that I found it. I was trying to get into Salem Horror like a year or two ago, and the link wasn't working for me. So I was just like clicking around on the website on those different links. And then one took me to this like external site full of like horror short films, and lo and behold, there it was. This also runs into the short film problem of God, I wish there were more and I wish there were longer. But it's one of the few short films where like that feels intentional and not like messiness on the script. I'm not actively frustrated because I feel like there's a really good like tight 90 trying to break out of this. I don't know, I love that it looks clean without slipping into like the Netflix sheen of too clean. There's an atmosphere that like settles from the first frame and like does not let up again until like the film ends. It's also one of the few films that I feel like actually understands what like a non-binary struggle with dysphoria and gender identity feels like. Unlike some films, I won't name names. Number 15, Love You Forever. God, this is really just like the stretch of short films, isn't it? Seppi's next short film is like finally coming out soon-ish, I hope. And I'm really excited for it because this film is just like such a nice, like, well, okay, not nice, but like interesting combination of like vibes. Just like love and hatred is not like opposing forces, but like something that is like inextricably tied together. Like, I don't know, I feel like this film really speaks to like anybody with siblings. Like, you love them and you hate them, and like there is a lot of conflicting emotions about how like you treat each other. And like I don't know what this film's status is as like a release property. I don't know if it has like an official public release yet. If it ever does, like absolutely seek it out. I think it is still hitting a few occasional film festivals, so whatever way you manage to see it, go see it. Number 14, The Yellow Wallpaper. I mean, I think, again, I'm gonna mention Paper Girl. One of the few films that is like interested in transness outside of like a coming out identity, or even in the sense that like most trans identity in film, at least in the horror specific context, well, it's either post-transition or it's like far pre-transition, where it's a character who like wants to be trans but cannot because gender, which is like most of like the early 80s stuff where it's like, I am a girl, but alas, my penis makes me a boy for eternity, like that kind of shit. And then there's a more recent like turn of things where it's like, no, I have been trans since forever and there is no identity outside of that, which is like different but still like equally uninteresting to me. And The Yellow Wallpaper is fun in the sense that like it's a good adaptation of the source material. I like that it takes like a more overt like bloody angle to it, and also in the sense that like it takes the question of like what is post-transition and like actually poses that question. And especially because like I think I watched this film like not long after my own top surgery, And it was like, oh, this is a question and like a sense of driftlessness that like is not just specific to me. Like this is a thing that like other people struggle with. And this was like the first time I'd actually like ever seen that in film. And like I hope to God that like Jake Kiernan like keeps making films, and specifically horror films, because I think she has like a really, really good eye for it just based off this alone. Number 13, Ambition. Hi again, Luis. So Computer Hearts might be like the most comprehensive trans narrative that Luis has made, but Ambition is personally my favorite. I have like rewatched it the most out of like the 3 features. First of all, like the song is great. I do not have the artist's name in my brain off the top of my head. I would come back to the song even if I never knew about this music video, but the music video I think like really enhances like the experience of listening to the song. I don't know how you feel like a coming of age, but somehow that's what this feels like. I know that's not like a good description, but like something about this song and music video is like riding a knife's edge of like going dark, but it like veers into like something lighter and like more affirming. Yeah. Number 12, The Silence of the Lambs. I have not rewatched this film since I was like 13, but my memory of it is being very good. I have had this thought affirmed by the entire world agreeing with that thought. And I mean, yeah, it's Silence of the Lambs. It's problematic and strange and super spooky, and it's a cultural landmark for a reason. Number 11, Cult of Chucky. My personal favorite of the Chucky films. Just in terms of like tone and especially visual style, like I fucking love the way this movie looks. Everything is like so washed out and white, and it really feels like, I think even more so than Curse of Chucky, like the low budget, like the filmmaking working to enhance what they could do versus like kind of like pushing against the restraints of it. And like, I'm not gonna lie, like the first season of Chucky kind of like dampens this film a little bit for me because it like does not go in the direction that I would have preferred it to go. But for what it is, as like, if you cut off the film and the TV show right here, I'd be totally happy with it. Like, again, it's my favorite Chucky. It feels like for the first time the franchise is like really doing something interesting and unique. And I wish they would have gotten more films like now that it was finally going in this direction, but it's fine. So at number 10, we have Coming Out, a short film that I feel like I cannot say a lot about besides the fact that it is really good. It makes me cry every single time I watch it, and I have never felt more than I feel about Trans Godzilla Kid. Number 9, the original Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yeah, it would have been really funny if I just like did not put this higher than the 2016 remake. I can't just say it's this for all the top 10, but I mean like it's Rocky Horror. Like it is fun and it is just like a good time despite its like occasionally dated politics and the fact that Richard O'Brien is like kind of an asshole. And I feel like, again, like what makes it work so much more than like its remake is just the fact that like it simultaneously feels like it knows that it's being subversive while also not trying to be subversive at all. Because like the remake is like, oh look, we're being even more subversive and even more inclusive, and isn't that great? And in the end, it just creates a film where like everything is so sexless and just kind of like equal playing field that like none of it feels risky. And then you get this film where it's like, okay, now every aspect of this feels like dangerous and risky, and like there's new things here that you like know people at the time had like never seen before, and it makes it like still an interesting film to watch to this day. Number 8, Dress to Kill. Okay, so I am working on a longer video essay specifically in defense of Dress to Kill because I think this film is great and is unfairly maligned by a lot of people. In short, I think this film is like gorgeous, well acted, and just like, I don't want to say unintentionally sympathetic because like, okay, I've seen the De Palma documentary. I've seen him talk about Dress to Kill. It's clear that he's not like against trans people, but he's also not like, he's an 80 fucking something year old guy. He's not like on the books as like the best ally in the world to ever ally. But like the film itself, I think is just like an interesting piece of art in the sense that like it almost was something so different, and this final product is like its own beast of like trans misogyny. I don't know. To me, there's like more to this film than just like, oh, Michael Caine is the bad guy in a wig, and that's bad because man in wig. I don't know. I think the film is like smarter than that, and also like deserves smarter criticism than that. But we'll get into that later. Number 7, Killer Condom. I got into the weirdest bidding war on eBay over a DVD for this, and I lost it, and I still just like ended up paying $50 for it somewhere else. It's fine. I am so sad that this film is out of print because it is genuinely like one of the most beautifully written films I think we have on this list. Like, you look at the description and you're like, okay, this is a trauma-distributed horror comedy, and it is just a completely different concept from like what you're expecting a film of this title and like content matter to be. Like, yes, it is the haha goofy condom biting dicks off movie, but it's also like a very serious kind of examination of like a gay love story and like this trans love triangle that like has not aged well at all, and like contraception and like a very specifically like not post-AIDS world, but like post-80s world and like post-dealing with all of that collective trauma. I believe there's like a rip on YouTube that is English subtitled, and it's not like the best transfer, but like if you want to watch it, like I highly recommend seeking it out there and then like trying somehow to find a DVD copy if you can. Number 6, Mesmerelda. I think this makes it officially like the top of the short films. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what I can say about this film that I have not already said into like oblivion. Gorgeously shot. I think like Paper Girl has very minimal dialogue. This straight up has like no dialogue. And it's just like entirely a visual experience of just like watching these expressions of terror and watching these like settings and landscape and just like so much destruction like compiled into like one place and one person and one frame that just like there's so many ideas happening here, and it is total bullshit that it cannot exist like properly online because it uses 9/11 footage. Like, there are so many films on this list that are on YouTube with like full frontal nudity, but like no, 9/11 is where we draw the line. But I mean, yeah, like there is such a strong artistic vision here. I like really fucking hope that the people involved in this like keep going in film, because I think it would be a great loss if they did not. Number 5, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. The film that made Sukiban Boy seem normal to my brain. Just like something about this film's harnessing of its own kinetic energy is fucking insane. And I don't know how to describe this film to anybody who hasn't seen it, because it feels like getting hit by a bus for like the entire runtime. And I don't know, I think it's funny that like a few people I've seen like take this film like at face value. It's like, oh, this is so like misogynistic and it hates like people who have abortions, it's transphobic, it's racist. And I'm like, I don't think this film takes itself seriously enough to believe those things about itself. But like, I also just like, this is very clearly, I think, like a comedy satire of films of that era. I do not believe this film holds a serious bone in its body. I cannot for the life of me find anything to be offended by. And yeah, Z-Man is like icon status in terms of like gay guys, in terms of trans guys, just like an all-around 10 out of 10 banger character. Number 4, Bit. Yeah, I thought this would end up going higher too, even though I think 4 is pretty damn high. I love Bit. I think I have made that super clear. I mean, it's a gorgeous film to look at. I engage, I think, really well with its politics. It's got a great soundtrack. There are just like a few rough edges that keep me from like fully pushing this into the top 3. And from what I remember about Brian Michael Elmore's like tweets about the film, these are rough edges that were like kind of taken out of his control in editing. So like in a perfect universe, this is a top 3 film. And I mean, still, like, I got my Made Me Monsters tattoo. Like, this film is in my DNA at this point. It is so fun and is one of like the few films that like I feel like engages specifically with the history of transness in horror films and has fun like playing around with that. It's one of the earliest like trans horror films I watched where I really felt, I'm like, okay, this guy gets it. And even if he doesn't get it, like he's putting on a good enough of a show that like I believe he gets it. And I do believe he gets it. Number 3, Psycho. So initially I had this as my number 1. And I think in my heart, all of these top 3 movies are like tied for the number 1 spot because I love them all for like incredibly different reasons. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but like bear with me. I mean, because like it's Psycho. It is basically flawless. The acting is immaculate. The cinematography is on like a whole nother level. There is so much to analyze here that like just putting Psycho 1960 into JSTOR like literally gets you almost like 50,000 journal results. I don't know, there's just something so specific about the era it was made and just like the look and the feel of it. Like, I can't I can't justify why it's not number one, but I also can't not justify why it sits at number three, because it is probably the one that I have like rewatched the least out of this top three. And that's not for any like lacking on its part. It's just like, I don't know, between this and the other two in this top three, it is the one that like if I really wanted to rewatch this film, I could not do so casually. It'd have to be in like a mood where I want to analyze, and that is not always the mood that I'm in. So that is like, I guess, my main reasoning for not number one. Number two, The Samurai. I feel oddly alone in how much I love this film, and I am still trying to figure out why exactly that is. The best I can think of is that it's like a man in a wig constituting transness film, which ordinarily, like 95% of the time, I'm on board that like I am sick of that visual trope. But this is one of the few films where I feel like that actually is like an intentional artistic choice that reflects upon like the mental state of our protagonist and how they view themselves. And like it's a lot, it's more than Michael Caine in a wig. And again, this was like a crowdfunded film that was like made for super cheap, I think. Even in that sense, like this is a really just like the atmosphere on this film is so thick, and just like the visual style, like there are so many interesting and creative choices in how like our director chooses to like portray this split of self, and how that like morphs into like attraction and gender envy. And like, I don't know, it's an interesting film because like it's one of those where like the antagonist and protagonist are the same person, and that can get like really, really hokey, especially in lower budget movies, and like trying to portray that. But I think in this film specifically, like it's really well pulled off. And like, I don't know, like the ending I think is really beautiful too. It just feels like a really, really personal film that like maybe wasn't originally about transness. Like if what I can remember of the director's statements tells me anything, like it's more about gayness than it is about transness, and that is its own thing. But just for like a film about learning to accept like the inner self, like there are few films I think as nuanced and heartfelt than there is like as this one. And at last, coming in at number one, Sleepaway Camp. If I had a nickel for every time somebody assumed I hated this film just because I was trans. I don't think I've had such a sharp change in opinion on a film since Ginger Snaps. Both as a trans narrative and as like a casual viewing, there's just something about this movie that keeps me coming back to it. And I think that was ultimately the reason that I made this my number one. And I did mean it when I say that the top three was like basically a three-way tie for number one. But Sleepaway Camp is pretty much the only one of those three where I am like continually plagued with the urge to rewatch it. Because I feel like for Psycho and for The Samurai, I have to be like in this academic mindset where I want to rewatch it. And me rewatching it is pretty much just like pausing it every 5 seconds so I can like write notes down or like analyze something or just like geek out about the filmmaking. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like a drastically different kind of viewing experience. And I put Sleepaway Camp on, and it's like pretty much my friends and I just like quoting the whole thing from memory from start to finish. Like this movie is just like so endlessly quotable and memorable in every choice that it makes. And it is like so genuinely fun on top of that. And it does get just as much intensive analysis out of me as Psycho and The Samurai do, by the way. It's just like, it's not so intricately constructed that I feel the need to dissect it at its core. It is, in fact, the opposite, where I feel like it is so messily put together that everything that keeps it standing and not collapsing like a house of cards makes me marvel at it. There are just so many interesting ideas at play in this film that I think that's why I hate the sequels as much as I do, because I see all the interesting directions that this film could have gone in subsequent installments. I see all the ways that like varying, like every single trans person has a Sleepaway Camp reinterpretation, because there is just something about this film that like speaks to us. And I think for like valid reason, like yes, it is a film about like being forced into a gender that is like not yours. And I think that can be read in like the transphobic sense of it, and in the sense that like Hiltzik probably originally intended. But for the most part, I see a lot more interpretations now where it is more of like, oh, let's look at this from like the trans affirming angle, where clearly like the sequels confirm that Angela like does feel at home as a woman, like she is a trans woman like through and through at this point. So let's re-examine this first film through the lens of like Aunt Martha accidentally got it right. So let's look at like how this gender fuck works as like a prepubescent child forced to work through like femininity in an overtly hostile environment. And so that is my best and worst of trans horror. As always, like, the links will be in the description if you want to seek out the full list of trans horror films. If you have opinions on this ranking list, I would love to hear them. I am endlessly fascinated by everybody else's opinions on these films. Especially in the context of like, I know that I'm the only one who has seen all of these very specific films in this very specific context, and I like knowing what like the general public thinks more of it. And if you'd like to see what further films are added to the canon after this, if you would like updates on all upcoming films involving trans actors, involving trans horror in any way, and if you would just like to support me in general, please go to the Patreon that will be linked in the description below. Thank you to all the patrons who are already there. Your support means the world to me, and I hope to see you guys again very soon.